on behalf of all the co-authors, I present this paper, which, as the title suggests, looks at the link between household food production and child dietary diversity in Nepal. The main motivation for this paper is to look at the link between what farm families grow and their child's dietary quality. So many studies have shown positive link between what farm families grow and what their children consume. And some studies have suggested that this association holds, but only if households live far from markets. So to test for other potential roles of mediating factors, this paper uses 2 rounds of survey data from Poshan, which is a large and nationally representative survey data, to test 2 main hypotheses. First is that farm production is linked to dietary intake, but only for older children. The rationale is that for older children above 2 years of age, they have diets similar to that of their families. So if households eat what they grow, children are more likely to do the same, as opposed to younger children under the age of 2 who require special feeding and caring practices. And those needs are less likely to be fulfilled even after having access to markets or with households growing more variety of food. And it is also indicated in the poor IYCF in complementary feeding practices in South Asia in general and specific to Nepal. The second hypothesis is that farm production is linked to dietary intake for poorer households. We expect poorer families to eat what they grow because they have lower purchasing power than richer households. So richer households have the options of buying food in the market given there's access to market to fulfill their consumption needs. The 2 main outcome variables we look at are whether child consumes 4 out of the 7 WHO food groups, which is also the cutoff for minimum dietary diversity for children under the age of 2. But our sample includes children under the age of 5, so we use this indicator for all the children in the sample. And the second outcome variable is whether a child consumes each of those 7 food groups. So our exploratory analysis using Poshan dataset show that children in poorer households have lower dietary diversity score as compared to children in richer households. And in this bar graph, we see both the median and the diamond markers here represent the mean for child dietary diversity score. So the question here is whether households can grow more food to fill this gap for poorer children, so to improve their dietary diversity. Our exploratory analysis also show that for children under 23 months of age, they have lower dietary diversity as compared to older children. Again, the question is whether households' own farm production can fill this gap for younger children to improve their dietary diversity. So the first thing we look at is the link between farm production diversity and whether child meets the minimum dietary diversity modified by child age and household wealth. And we define farm production diversity as total number of food groups that households grow and total number of food species that households grow, and whether households grow any food, that is whether they are farmers or non-farmers. And the second thing we look at is the link between production of each of these 7 food groups and its consumption, again modified by child age and household wealth. When we use minimum dietary diversity as the outcome variable, we use logit model with VDC and year fixed effects. Here the VDC fixed effects is to control for geographical variation, and the main coefficients of interest here are shown in blue, where the main predictor variable is the farm production diversity variables that I just described. And this includes a wealth quintile as the mediating variable and the interaction between wealth quintile and each of the farm production diversity variables. And to test for mediation of child age, we split the sample into 5 different child age categories. And for consumption of individual food groups as the outcome, the basic specification model is the same, except in this case, the predictor variable is production of each of those 7 food groups, and the rest is the same. This is our first set of the main results, and to draw your attention to just columns 3 and 5 here, we see that when households grow more number of foods, they have higher odds of meeting minimum dietary diversity for older children in 18 to 23 month and 24 to 59 month age group. And for the same age groups, we also see that richer households have higher odds of meeting minimum dietary diversity. And if you look at just the column 3, we see that it's the results hold, but only for poorer households. And if you look at columns 1 and 2, which is for the younger cohort, we do not see any association between production and consumption. And you will also note that the sample size for the younger cohort is a lot smaller than for the older cohorts. So what we see is the results, it could be an artifact of the small sample size. So we test for that using larger sample and still find no association between production and consumption, except that richer households have higher odds of meeting minimum dietary diversity in the 6 to 11 month age group. And for columns 3 and 5, we see that the results still hold as before. This is the second set of the results for individual food groups. And again, looking at the last 3 columns, we see that when households grow vitamin A-rich fruits and vegetables, other fruits and vegetables, eggs and dairy, they have higher odds of children consuming these food groups for the older age groups. And we don't see any association for meat, legumes, nuts, and seeds. Now, if we zoom in on the food groups that are positively associated, we see that for vitamin A-rich fruits and vegetables, it is positively associated, but only for older children and at lower levels of wealth. And for this age group, we see that richer households have higher odds of eating vitamin A-rich fruits and vegetables, but for other fruits and vegetables, we see that it's positively associated, but only at lower levels of wealth. Similarly, for dairy and eggs, the association is positive for older children, but for dairy, we see that this holds for poorer households, and richer households are more likely to feed more dairy. As opposed to eggs, we see that across all the different age groups, richer households are more likely to feed eggs. So in summary, agricultural production diversity is positively associated with child dietary diversity for older children in poorer households. And for individual food groups, for the food groups that are positively associated, we see for eggs that is positively associated for older children and at all levels of wealth. For fruits and vegetables and dairy, it is also positively associated for older children, only at lower levels of wealth. So to conclude, the findings imply that farm diversifying programs that are aimed to improving child dietary diversity may see more effects if for children above 18 months of age. And for younger children, perhaps more other approaches or interventions may be needed to improve diet diversity and diet quality. Also for older children, more benefits of these nutrition interventions may be seen if it is targeted to poorer farming households that live far from markets. And finally, for the food groups that are positively associated, except for eggs, fruits and vegetables and dairy are mediated by wealth. Thank you.